myself thinking a lot lately about 1800s America. A cheery people. A few years ago, I wrote a book about our contemporary death practices and how they descend from, or in some cases, rebel against those of the people who invented what we think of when we think of death and mourning, these folks. In 1800s America, people grew up seeing a great deal of death. In those days, the Grim Reaper showed up fairly often at home. Death by flu, childbirth, and farming accident were quite common. In this scenario, dying at home was what people preferred. Think of it this way: you knew you were going to die. You had grown up seeing death your whole life. You just hoped that when it happened to you, you would be in your own bed. This hope evolved into an ideal known as the good death. Death at home, surrounded by loved ones, and ideally saved. In one form or another, the good death found its way into books, plays, later even movies. Love story, anybody? Yeah. And it all stemmed from evangelical Christianity. Quick bit of history here. The Second Great Awakening had, 1, reframed death as a time of reunion with dead family members, and 2, recharacterized Jesus as a friend. This was a stark contrast to the old New England Protestantism, in which we were all just sinners in the hands of an angry God, bound by sin on one side and predestination on the other. Now Christians had agency. You could decide, I'm going to be saved, and you would go to heaven. And it was a pretty cool place now, right? But what hadn't changed, the focus was still very much on what happened after you died, not before. From gravestones to inspirational pamphlets to kits for how to create throw pillows at home, the idea now was very much that my reward is in heaven. This after-earthly consolation as an extrinsic reward guiding our behavior for our entire time here on earth, it's not satisfying to many of us as Unitarian Universalists. But let me tell you, it can be a comfort when you're a child. It will come as a surprise, perhaps to no one here, to learn that I was kind of a morbid kid. Many nights I would lie awake, the fear of my own eventual death and the deaths of those I loved driving me to panicked tears. My father would sit with me, his hand on my back, intoning, "It probably won't happen for a long, long time." But this did little to comfort me. Unlike our Victorian forebears, I was raised in an era of comparable longevity. I probably wasn't going to die from a farming accident or the common cold in 1980s Pittsburgh. I was also raised UU, and that longevity was the only hope my parents could offer up to my fears. As a child, I'll be honest with you, I felt resentful of our faith, for having no after-death consolation, the way, say, my best friend Bethany's religion did. Why couldn't we be like Bethany? Her family was Presbyterian. She would assure me during nighttime sleepover conversations that there was a heaven and thus hope for those who believed. But it was already too late for me. Even as I learned and sang Amy Grant songs as the two of us pedaled around on our bikes, thanks choir, all right, I could not believe. And everything that Bethany said about heaven felt like more of a wish than a reality. As an adult, I wrote an entire book investigating our country's history with and our current alienation from mourning and death. But I felt unable to connect the whole experience with my own fears very much alive. Then we had our son. His questions about death started out as casually curious around the age of 3. But upon hearing our responses that death is when our bodies stop working and every living thing does die, he grew more concerned and urgent. Soon, I was the one rubbing his back at night and telling him, not for a long, long time. It was his father, my husband, who hit upon a more successful tactic. How do you counteract the fear of the nothing and the null, except with everything that is absolutely present and tangible? And so these days, when our son interrupts a car trip's long silence by exclaiming, "But I don't want to die," this is what we say. "Yes, sweetheart, it can feel scary to think about." And we might even have a whole conversation about that. But then we'll say, "But here's something else. You're going to Gamma and Papa's next weekend, and they are so excited to see you." Or, "Hey, you know what? You can bring your new butterfly wand to show and tell tomorrow at pre-K." Thanks to UUCA for that one. Or, "You know what? We're going to see so many cool lights and decorations when we go trick-or-treating. And do you think you want to go with your ballerina costume or your lion costume?" It's a distraction, yeah, right? But it's more than that. It's an attempt to get him to see the potential that life itself has to be all-encompassing. Because, as UUs, we believe that life is a worthy distraction. And because, as his parents, we know that there is so much for him to look forward to. Sometimes we get a little carried away and our eyes begin to glisten with it as we go on telling him, "Next year, you'll learn how to read and you will sing so many songs you don't even know yet. And one day you'll graduate college and you can travel anywhere." This usually interrupts us to ask if he can still live with us when he's a grown-up. And we say, "You're always welcome, babe, but we'll see how you feel about that when you're 18. Because, of course, by then, the years will have made him a more mature person, I hope. And a different person, right, from who he is at age 4. His father and I know we live so many different lives within just this one life. And each of those lives that we lead is its own universe of wonder, as well as sorrow and hardship. But we also know that he doesn't really get what we're saying, what we're trying to show him, which is life's very enormity. He still gazes at us from the other side of this gulf of understanding that no amount of hand-holding will bring him across, because that gulf is years of life itself. This is what we're thinking. What we say is, yes, it can seem scary, and it's certainly a great mystery. And look at this crisp fall day and all of us together. Smell the air. Feel the crunch of the leaves right now. Look. And guess what? This Christmas in Pittsburgh, there might be snow. And this cataloging of earthly wonders, from the mundane to the monumental, usually does the trick, usually shifts the conversation. I've realized that this practice of resetting our son's focus has become an act of faith and a comfort to me. Because, of course, Unitarian Universalism is utterly rooted in this world. Rather than dismissing our earthly pain and joys in favor of whatever comes next, we are encouraged to engage fully with both the world's myriad traumas and its crisp fall leaves. And here's where at least part of my own comfort lies. Just as my spouse and I cannot completely bridge with words that gap between our understanding and yours, my son, of the magnitude and complexity held by even your one single life, I can't help but think that there's an even greater complexity that I myself cannot grasp, a complexity that's part and parcel with the great mystery of all of existence. In the meantime, there's work to do here, and fall leaves. Or, as Gabriel Garcia Marquez writes in 100 Years of Solitude, "It's enough for me to be sure that you and I exist at this moment. So may it be."